So when Junior told the FOI assembly, he said, quote, "The nigga don't want to give up the house. All you got to do is go to the house, beat down the walls until it comes tumbling down, cut the nigga's tongue out, put it in an envelope, send it to me, and I will stamp it approved and give it to the messenger." Many people who I've talked to who were at that particular meeting said it was very clear to all of them that was an assassination order. You do what you're supposed to do to take Malcolm out.
Now a new directive is supposedly issued at all mosques to leave Malcolm alone. That is, discontinue any new attempts to take him out, because a bigger foolproof plan to deal with Malcolm is in order. Now, Captain Joseph is told to wage psychological warfare on Malcolm, and he's instructed to drive around in the mosque-owned station wagon and cruise by all the places that Malcolm frequents and just smile at Malcolm, because he knows that there's a bigger surprise in store for Malcolm on the 21st of February. Joseph is told to make smoke in the west and fire in the east. But the old folks say, where there's smoke, there's fire. The two patsies alongside Captain Joseph are also in for a surprise.
Malcolm didn't know what he was playing with. No, he didn't. He didn't know what he was playing with. You don't jump up against a divine messenger of God like he did. He asked to die. And God obliged him. No, you don't understand. Like someone said, did you Muslims kill Malcolm? So the messenger said, and what if we did? He said, what if we did? Have you ever seen a leader scandalized like Malcolm scandalized Muhammad? Have you ever heard of anything like that? Don't you know if you scandalize a man who's loved and honored by the people, what are you asking for? You're asking for death. And he got what he asked for. And those who killed him, they weren't sneaking behind no damn counter. They came in the place where the man was preaching and killed him in front of his own followers. That's fearless men. And those who were there to guard him, they were ducking. Damn cowardly dogs. Ducking and running under poles instead of trying to protect the man. And you say as your leader, you're damn punk, you don't have no leader. If he's your leader, why the hell don't you stand up for him? Now all of a sudden they can serve you a dead man on a platter. And you eat him up as your leader, not knowing nothing about him while he was alive and know less about him now that he's dead. Malcolm's momentum carried him to his death.
Country, I say I need to talk to Yusef Shah. He gone. I say I need to talk to Alex Haley. And sometimes they may get to them before we do. Listen. In Spike Lee's book, he asked him who killed Malcolm. He talked about zealots. The word zealots is used. Go back and see who interviewed and called themselves zealots.
As part of a more than 20-year investigation of the circumstances surrounding the death of Malcolm X, I examined this subject on national television at a time when interest in it was at its nadir, and exposure of any of the teachings of Malcolm X were enough to get you kicked out of the television business. The new image of Malcolm X and the subsequent acceptance of him as an icon has revisited his old image. There are as many Malcolm X's as there are people who know him. The recent movie version disappointed many of the serious followers of Malcolm and superficially introduced many others to some of the facts and facets of his life. However, after examining Malcolm's life and death, the facts don't point to the cut and dry conclusion that Elijah Muhammad's Nation of Islam gave the, quote, call to kill Malcolm, as the movie suggests. Most leaders of the Nation of Islam were filled with blind hatred for what they perceived as Malcolm's portrayal of sexual corruption by Elijah Muhammad, his mentor. Their responses created a climate that made the murder of Malcolm X a fait accompli. One of Malcolm's dissenters was Louis X, a relatively unknown at the time, who would later become Minister Louis Farrakhan and the leader of the group. In a 1985 interview, I asked him about his role in Malcolm's death. Do you feel that your criticisms of Malcolm during that period contributed to his assassination?
I feel that the climate created by Malcolm's revelation of the domestic life of Elijah Muhammad to the press, feeding them information that they could use in a negative way against the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, it created an equal and opposite reaction among the followers of Elijah Muhammad. I, being one of those zealous followers, jumped to the defense of Elijah Muhammad and to the attack of Malcolm. And so in that context, I believe my words and others' words were like fuel on a fire.
Did you apologize to Malcolm X's widow, Betty Shabazz?
I sat with Betty Shabazz last year in February. I was speaking in upstate New York. I think it was Albany. And Betty came and sat on the stage with me. I sat with Betty afterwards, and she told me what she had on her mind. I could not speak back to Betty. She was very angry, as naturally she would be. This is the first time she had confronted one of those whom she would look at as a contributor to the condition that led to her husband's assassination. And naturally, in that first meeting, she was exceedingly angry with me, and a brother was looking over my shoulder, and she was blessing me out, if you will. And I took every word that she said, because I feel that it is only when Betty can express herself to those of us whom she feels were involved and who may have been involved, that the healing can begin.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, black Muslims pulled the triggers of the guns that blasted Malcolm into martyrdom. But some people who were Muslims were undercover cops and FBI agents, and to some extent, they were key members of the top leadership of the Nation of Islam. Others simply covered their greed by pretending to protect Elijah Muhammad's reputation.
The nation's leadership bypassed Malcolm and called Clay directly. They accepted the young champion into the Nation of Islam and announced his new name, Muhammad Ali, at their annual convention on Savior's Day. Malcolm was not invited. In his place, introducing Elijah Muhammad, was Malcolm's former protege, the minister from Boston, Louis X.
Minister Malcolm was honest. He was sincere. He was dedicated to the uplifting of African-American people. Then you had another group of people who were officials there in Chicago who were dedicated to the uplifting of themselves. He accused them of taking money, of buying expensive jewelry, of buying furs. He accused them of converting the Nation of Islam into a criminal organization. A lot of the well-placed people in Islam had been trained by Malcolm. Some of them had been reformed by Malcolm. They liked their little petty power positions, and there were other people in the nation with aspiration toward that number one slot. And if Elijah Muhammad died and if Malcolm X took over the nation, the first thing he might do was some serious house cleaning he would move the money changers out of the temple. So the idea was to get rid of him before the event of the passing of the old man. When you're considered a hypocrite, it's quite different than saying a hypocrite in Christianity or just a hypocrite who posed as a friend. In Islam, when you are accused of being a hypocrite, there are times when your life can be put on the line.
I recall getting some of those papers, and one I remember that stays in my mind is a picture that had Malcolm with horns on his head, and his head had been severed, and they were calling him a Judas. And I recall reading the language of ministers in the paper. I won't say Farrakhan. I know he was one of them, but there were other ministers too. And I recall reading that language, and I said to myself, they're trying to get him killed. They want him dead.
I was surprised to hear that the house had been bombed. But I was not surprised to know that it had been done by Muslims, because I know that's the way they fight. I know that, be that the case, it could not have happened without Yusef Shah. Could not have happened. It could not have happened except by the Muslims that are there in New York.
The Nation of Islam accused Malcolm of setting fire to his own home rather than vacating as ordered by the court. Later that day, the nation's representative, Captain Joseph, inspected the scene.
Who bombed his house?
I don't know. All we know, it just got on fire.
Does Malcolm know who bombed his house?
I don't know. He never said. And if he did, you know, he should have brought him to justice.
There were news reports of threats against his life. Is his life really in danger?
Maybe it was. He said it was. He said it was.
Do you feel now that there was a climate within the nation itself that put his life in danger?
Well, as you know, in a nation, you have all kinds of people. And they have different thoughts. You have sympathizers. They have different thoughts. You know? And you have people that not even attached to the community. They like what they hear, but you just can't live the life. Anything might happen. That scare you. So anything could happen. The atmosphere was there. What was being said was there. You see? You got to understand, you know, Mr. Muhammad and what he represented. That's what the people don't understand.
I wanted you to know that my house was bombed. It was bombed by the black Muslim movement upon the orders of Elijah Muhammad. Now, they had come around, so they had planned to do it from the front and the back so that I couldn't get out. And the fire hit the window, and it woke up my second oldest baby. But the fire burned on the outside of the house. But had that one gone through that window, it would have fallen on a 6-year-old girl, a 4-year-old girl, and a 2-year-old girl. And I'm going to tell you, if it had done it, I'd taken my rifle and gone after anybody in sight. I would not wait. And I say that because of this. The police know the criminal operation of the black Muslim movement because they have thoroughly infiltrated. The only thing that I regret in all of this is that two black groups have to fight and kill each other off. Elijah Muhammad could stop the whole thing tomorrow just by raising his hand. Really, he could. He could stop the whole thing by raising his hand. But he won't. He doesn't love black people. He doesn't even love his own followers, proof of which they're killing each other. They killed one in the Bronx. They shot another one in the Bronx. They tried to get 6 of us Sunday morning, and the pattern has developed across the country. The man has gone insane, absolutely out of his mind. Besides, you can't be 70 years old and surround yourself by a handful of 16, 17, 18-year-old girls and keep your right mind. You can't do it.
My name is Gene Roberts, and I was assigned by the New York City Police Department to infiltrate Malcolm's organization, report back membership, names, weapons, if any, and I attended meetings and was part of the security on occasions. And at this particular meeting, I was standing up front along with about 4 or 5 other guys, other members, and I heard a commotion in the middle to my right. I started for the commotion, and I see this young fella come down the middle aisle, and then slip into about the second or third row and take a seat. And he was wearing blue suit, white shirt, and red tie, which is basically uniform for the members of the Nation of Islam. So after the meeting, I reported back to the department that I felt I had just saw a dry run on Malcolm's life. And when that was going to go down, I wasn't sure.
Malcolm did not expect to live another week. He promised to reveal the names of those plotting his death at next Sunday's meeting at the Audubon Ballroom.
Then I heard a lot of shots. And I looked up, and these 3 that were sitting across the front are now working their way from Malcolm's right to Malcolm's left, shooting at him.
I saw my husband falling back. He didn't bend, he just fell straight. I was facing the assassins, so I saw them stand up and take my father's life. An image that I wondered if I could have prevented it.
Three members of the Nation of Islam were arrested and convicted of the murder. But the question of a larger conspiracy to silence Malcolm X was never explored.
Well, Malcolm X said that the black Muslims were trying to kill him, and he was going to name those he thought would commit the crime yesterday before he was shot. Did you comment on that?
I don't have any knowledge of anyone trying to kill Malcolm.
I wasn't remorseful. I wasn't sorry. For what? And as Mr. Muhammad said, he taught violence and he died violent. And he was a hypocrite. And I say that he was a Benedict Arnold.
20 years now, I've been conducting investigations into the death of Malcolm X. And unlike the assassinations of John and Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King to some extent, the assassination of Malcolm X got very little official notice until a resurgent interest brought on by the movie Malcolm X. However, each new development, while seeming to further complicate the mystery, seems to shed new light and insights. In 1980, the only confessed killer of Malcolm X, who is no longer accessible to the press, gave us his first film interview after 14 years of silence. It provided then, as it still does today, a new way of looking at the case. For the first time ever, we're going to show the entire interview. I'm Tony Brown. In a moment, the assassin.
Tony Brown's Journal is brought to you by Pepsi and its bottlers. This program is a part of Pepsi-Cola's continuing support of your community's cultural, educational, and business interests.
You're now Mujahid Abdul Halim.
Yes.
You have been in prison for 14 years.
That's correct.
And you are now granting the first television interview since you have been convicted of killing Malcolm X. Why have you at this time given permission for this interview?
Well, basically, Tony, because for a long time I have wanted to, and I have hoped that someday, you know, we could really get at the truth in regards to the case. As you probably know, my two co-defendants, Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson, have always maintained the innocence in the case. And even during the trial, I had stated myself that they were not involved in the killing of Malcolm X, you know. And this is an opportunity to get it out before the public. And hopefully it may have some effect. And I would like to see the brothers exonerated.
At the trial, you pleaded guilty. You said that you were one of the persons involved in the assassination.
This is correct.
If you said that you were involved at that time, you also said at that time that these two brothers were not involved, but they didn't believe you then.
That's correct.
What is the difference in the information you're bringing forth now that would convince someone that you're now giving a more accurate story?
Well, at the time, I had stated on the witness stand that the brothers was not involved, but I was asked to give names of the individuals who was involved in the case with me. And at that time, I didn't give the names of the other brothers that took part in the assassination or the killing of Malcolm X. I didn't give the names. And because I didn't give the names, it was felt that, well, perhaps I was just trying to free the other brothers. I was trying to take the weight myself and protect them. And this seems to have been the feelings at that time. You know, this is the way that things was going. But I couldn't, at the time, there was a lot of things involved. You know, I really didn't feel that I could state names. I had to disassociate myself from the Nation of Islam at the time. I said that I wasn't a Muslim. Things like this here, because I was trying to protect the Nation of Islam at the time. I didn't want to, like, draw the nation into it on my part. So I was really trying to protect the nation, right? But it got to a point, originally when the trial first started, I actually felt that the brothers would be cut loose. I didn't think that they was going to be convicted until the trial started going on, and it became obvious what was being done. And at that point, you know, I had to say something. And this is when I said what I said, that they were not involved.
In addition to the fact that you say you were not in the Audubon Ballroom on the day that Malcolm got killed, what logic is it that you can offer us that would convince us that you were not there?
Well, the only thing that I can say is that I couldn't hardly walk that day, for one. I was home with my wife and my children. My children were too young to testify. Other people knew that I was home because they called my house. And I guess the greatest logic in the world is that how could I possibly be in the Audubon Ballroom that particular day when so many people that were there knew me, that was with Malcolm, in other words, knew me, and then they would not know that I was there. That's kind of illogical. People that had known me for 2 or 3 years, they wouldn't know me on that day. Not very likely.
My own very powerful feeling, which I cannot prove, but which I feel very strongly, is that Butler and Johnson are innocent. The strongest single piece of positive evidence is, of course, Hayer's own sworn word that they weren't there, that he knows who was there. He has identified those men by name, address, detailed description, occupation, so on. Unfortunately, the authorities do not choose to look for those people and find out if they did it.
Why were you trying to protect the Nation of Islam?
Well, when I said I was trying to protect the Nation of Islam, my own involvement in the case was basically based on my own religious convictions at the time. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad was the leader of the Nation of Islam at the time. We referred to him as being the messenger of Allah. And there was conflict with Malcolm at that time, you know, internal conflict in the community. And I felt that if I had made it known that I was indeed a Muslim at the time, that I was indeed a member of the Nation of Islam at that time, that it wouldn't be a good thing for me to do.
Were you involved?
It was better for me to appear as being an outsider, but yet involved in the case.
Was the assassination a conspiracy concocted by the Nation of Islam?
This is a good question. Okay. The way that I got involved in the case, as I said earlier, was because of the conflict between Malcolm and Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And there were certain statements that Malcolm had made in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Accusations that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had fathered children by other women, things like this here. A lot of other statements that was being made. And most of the Muslims at the time just actually felt that Malcolm was slandering the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that he was defaming him, that he was lying, you know. And this led to me really getting involved because as I had stated in my own affidavit to the court in regards to the innocence of the other two brothers, I stated in that affidavit how I had got involved in the case and how I was approached in the first place by two brothers. I gave their names, and I put all of this in my affidavit. And I explained my own part in getting involved in this. I submitted this to the courts. William Kunstler submitted this to the courts. Of course, this affidavit was given to him, and he submitted it to the court. I was hoping that it would be enough information in that affidavit to really bring the truth out, to really show that Islam and Aziz, known to most people perhaps as Butler and Johnson, was not involved in the case. This is what I did. This was the last thing that I did, submitting the affidavits, right, to the courts.
Did you uncover any evidence of Muslim involvement?
I think the evidence is circumstantial but quite clear. I cannot track the chain of command exactly. I cannot say whether Elijah Muhammad himself was involved or not. His son Wallace believes that he wasn't. But a member of his family came to New York during the period of the bitter feud between Malcolm and the messenger, Muhammad, and made a very violent speech in the New York mosque, saying that, inviting the assembled security men of the Nation of Islam, and I'm using his language, to go out to Malcolm's house in Queens, clap on the walls till the walls come tumbling down, cut the nigger's tongue out, send it to me, I'll stamp it approved and give it to the messenger. That was taken by members of the Nation of Islam to be, at the very least, an invitation and more likely an order.
Yes, I was there. I heard it. That was Elijah Muhammad Jr. And it was about, I would estimate about 700 people there at the time, plus officials in the Nation of Islam at the time from all over the country, security officials, and the captains of various mosques, their aides, and so forth. Yes.
You were recruited, were you not?
I guess you could say yes, I was. I was approached by two brothers, brothers that I knew. I was in the Nation of Islam at the time. They were in the Nation of Islam at that time. They pretty much knew what my feelings was in regards to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I had a lot of respect, a lot of love for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I had you know, no idea really at the time of the validity of what Malcolm was saying, some of the things that he was saying. And I, like most other Muslims at that time, you know, we were referred to as, black Muslims back in those days. And most of us felt that Malcolm was just outright lying. So when I was approached in regards to it, and I was asked my feelings in regards to it, I said I thought it was bad. I thought it was just, you know, this is a disgrace. He's defaming the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And at that time, we recognized him as being the messenger of Allah. And, you know, for someone to defame him, we had to deal with that, you know. And these brothers knew what my feelings was about it, and I knew how they felt about it. One thing led to another.
How old were you then?
I had just turned 24 when I was in the hospital. In February when this incident happened, I had just turned 24 then while I was in the hospital.
What kind of person were you then?
I would say, basically, I was considered to be what you would call a good brother. I was very dedicated in the Nation of Islam at that time, you know. Whatever duties that there was for Muslims to do, you know, I always did mine. I sold the Muhammad Speaks newspapers at the time. I was involved in many Muslim affairs. I was very dedicated. And I truly believed at the time in the Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teachings.
What actually happened that day, February 21, 1965?
Well, that morning, and I would say really to the night before, me and the other individuals that I mentioned, we had decided that we was going to move on Malcolm. We was going to kill him if we possibly could on the 21st. And we visited the Audubon Ballroom the night before. You know, we went there. It was a dance. We went to the dance just like anyone else. We looked the place over, looked around, cased it. And when we left, on our way back to Jersey, we decided that we would move on the situation at the ballroom the next morning. And the next morning we met at, I think it was his house. And then we went over to house, as I had stated in my affidavit, and we drew up a strategy, how we was going to go into the ballroom, where we was going to sit, and what we was going to do. And knowing that there would be a crowd there, we figured that it's a possibility that we could do it. That's what we did.
What was that strategy, and what did you do?
Basically, it was for us to first make sure that there would be no searching. So the first of us to approach the door would know that. If indeed someone was to search, we would just turn around and we would not enter. But on approaching the ballroom, no one searched. So this meant that we could go right in. We are all from out of town. Most of the people didn't recognize us anyway. So we just came in as regular people interested in the program. And our strategy was basically for me and the other brother named to sit down front. The ballroom was broken up into different sections. We sat on the left-hand side in the front. Brother named myself, right in the front row. There was two brothers sitting behind me. And brother, I had a 45, had a Luger. I had a sawed-off shotgun. And our strategy was, as soon as the minister came out to speak, as soon as he opened up his speech, that would fire the shotgun. That and myself, we would fire our guns in the direction of Malcolm. And this is exactly what we did. With that, there was another individual who sat in the back. His name was... His thing was to cause a distraction. Right at the time of when the minister was getting ready to open up, he accused someone of going into his pocket. And at the same, around the same time, he threw a smoke bomb to cause a little distraction, right? And basically, this is what we did. So we went in, and we did just that. There was guards on the front. When the confusion started, they moved, and everything just went off. It's like that.
You have in your recent affidavit named 4 other men, but in your account of what went on in the Audubon, you named 3 other men and yourself. It's a total of 5. Where was the 4th man?
It's me. Behind me, it was had the shotgun, and there was the other man was sitting in the back of the auditorium.
So that 5 of you were physically in the Audubon?
Yes.
I found evidence of negligent behavior by the New York police. They discovered 2 weeks before Malcolm was assassinated that a plot was afoot against his life. They knew where it was coming from. I don't believe they knew the exact day or time. In fact, that was not set until Hayer and his friends met the night before they did it. But they knew it was going to happen, and they made no serious effort to protect Malcolm's life. They offered him police protection. They did it cynically because they knew he would turn it down, that politically it would be impossible for him to appear in public surrounded by policemen. And so, as one high-ranking officer of the Bureau of Special Services, the secret police unit in New York, told me, that took us off the hook. And so on the day of the assassination, the position of the police department was essentially to let it happen, I think. There was a large unit of uniformed officers assigned to the Audubon Ballroom that day. They were withdrawn from the door just before the rally and hidden out of sight in a hospital across the street. That's been the occasion for a lot of conspiracy theory. I don't think it stands up. I don't think it stands up because they moved at the request of Malcolm's most trusted lieutenant. So I think that was, in a sense, Malcolm's fault.
What about the FBI?
The FBI, I find no direct evidence that they actively plotted the case. The most suggestive thing I've found is an FBI memo from the Chicago office. Chicago was the headquarters of the Nation of Islam. The Chicago office, 4 years after Malcolm's death, boasted to J. Edgar Hoover that they had, quote, developed the feud between Malcolm and Elijah Muhammad.
You seem today like a very changed person. You are coming forth and telling a story that is not going to do you much good. Are you changed?
I would have to say yes, I've changed. I don't know if anyone could understand. You know, when you have religious convictions and you base them on a certain thing, and then you have to change that. I have changed simply because our whole, the whole Nation of Islam has gone through a whole transition with the leadership of the Honorable Wallace D. Muhammad, who really, I would say, is responsible for my changing. Because when he came into office as leader of this community, and he said certain things in regards to his father, I realized then that, in truth, that many of us really worshiped the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. We looked at him as if he was some kind of a god, you know. And his son broke him down and explained him as, my father is only a man like any other man. He explained that his father had weaknesses, just like any other man might have weaknesses. And he even said that his father had fathered some children by other women. Now, when I heard that, I can only describe it as if you can imagine taking a piece of clay that has to be balled up and made all over again. You know, I had you know, really, it really balled me up, and I had to really do some deep thinking on that, because I always felt that the truth would be known in regards to Malcolm. But for a long time, I felt that Malcolm was really lying, that Malcolm was really wrong, you see. And I always felt that the truth someday would come out. But I never really believed that at that time that it would come out that Malcolm was really speaking truth. So with the changes that came about in the Nation of Islam, with the leadership of the Honorable Wallace D. Muhammad, well, I had to change too. I had to change too, and I had to accept that change. And so, you know, I have to, you know, say what happened. You know, I have to say what happened. I have to let it be known what happened, irregardless of what the consequences are. You know, how can I benefit from it? You know, how can I benefit from it? You know, when you believe in something, you love something, man, and then, you know, you find out that, wow, it's not like you thought it was. Don't get me wrong. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad did many great and wonderful things for the black man in America. I still respect and love the man. But truth is truth. Truth is truth. And it has been revealed. You know, things have come out. And I have to change. I have to change, you know. Or I'm tested, you know. Do I really believe in this? Was I really searching for truth? Was I really looking for Islam in its purest sense? And I found out that I didn't have it in its purest sense.
Do you believe that you were used, that your deep devotion for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was used to manipulate you?
It's possible. It's possible. At the time, you know, no one could convince me that that was the case, but I realize now that it's possible. It's very possible that I could have been a pawn. It's very possible that someone just knew I was a good candidate to, you know, do this, and I could have been manipulated. It's hard for me to say. I couldn't say who may have done this. I really couldn't tell you who handed down the order to move on Malcolm. I really couldn't tell you. All I could tell you, as much as I have told you now, I was approached. Somebody approached the people who approached me, you know. I can't say who approached them, you see. Wow. So it was things were, at that time, things was usually done in a chain of command.
But do you know who approached the people who approached you?
No, I don't. No, I don't. And if I did know, I would say. You can believe it. I would say.
You have
I really couldn't say. I could only guess about that, and I wouldn't want to.
You have named 4 men who, unless they have gone through the conversion that you have, are some very dangerous men. And no prison is a country club. What do you think this does to your security, to your safety?
My safety is really in the hands of Allah. And I feel this way. Any men that I have named, if they truly believed in Islam, like many Muslims at that time were saying that they believed in Islam, then they would understand what I am saying, you know. We all got to die someday. And I don't fear in that sense, because, you know, my interpretation of life is a lot different than a lot of other people, you know. I've seen a lot of suffering, you know, all these years in prison, you know. It has been very lonely in many respects, so I'm not going to worry about that. But anyone that is for truth would be for what Mujahid Abdul Halim is saying right now. So I think that more people would support what I'm saying than they would be against what I'm saying. So I just let the chips fall where they may in regards to that.
Like Lee says, think the FBI and the CIA had anything to do with the climate? No. They weren't active. Everybody knew we might be infiltrated. That was just what everybody wants it to be. Everybody wants. Thank you, Brother Osaf. No, not that they weren't active. Everybody knew we might be infiltrated. That's just what everybody wants it to be. The FBI or the CIA had nothing to do with it? Spike Lee asked. No. It was strictly between Malcolm and ... Zealots? Did you know any of those guys? I knew all of them, said Yusef. Did you know did you know what was going to happen that day? Huh? You're something, Mr. Lee. What about Norman Butler? What about Norman Butler and Thomas Johnson? Quote, they were logical, ... After they went to prison, Mr. Muhammad about them, said Yusef, kind of laughing to himself. You're something, Mr. Lee. If you've ever talked to any of these brothers, did they ever have any remorse or none whatsoever? They say Hayer did. Tell me what Minister Farrakhan said, Yusef Ali said. He said they were jealous, zealots, said Spike Lee. That was it.